All right. Hello. Good evening. Well, I hope everyone's doing all right. I'm certainly feeling better. I know I had to cancel this last time because I was feeling horrendously sick. Yeah, I really caught possibly the worst stomach flu that I've gotten in like 10 years. Um, uh, Thankfully, it didn't last too long. But yeah, that was pretty brutal. Um, so for anyone who wasn't here last time, what this is about is so I noticed something that sort of should have been obvious, but I bumped into a few statistics that sort of made. I mean, it's sort of one of those things that you take for granted a little bit until you realize other people aren't noticing how obvious it is. So it's that in South Africa we've had democracy for 30 years, but white people vote for white parties, black people vote for black parties, and minorities mostly vote for white parties now. They leaned a little bit the other way beforehand. We'll get into that later. But generally speaking, there's a minority voting block and there's a majority voting block. So it's like black versus not black in in South African elections. And so you've basically got these stable. I mean, there's the Zulus as well. They're another category. Again, I promise you we'll get into that. But basically, there's just these straight voting blocks, and anyone who tells you, particularly the DA, so the DA is the main liberal opposition in South Africa, what they're going to sort of say on their pitches is that they keep trying to go into this plan to scoop up all of the other votes in the country, and but they don't get it, and their internal research shows that they know that they don't get black votes, but they really, really push hard, and there's some things that they do that are kind of foolish. So, I mean, I'll mention this up front, but I think it'll come up later. There's a Jordan Hill Lewis sort of thing. He did this big thing in Parliament recently. Well, not national Parliament, provincial Parliament. Jordan Hill Lewis is the mayor of Cape Town. He's one of the most competent and sort of more serious politicians in the DA. He's a young guy. I think he's only a year older than me, and but he sits boasting in the Parliament that they spend, what is it, like 74% of the budget on free services for black people in poor parts of Cape Town, which it was an astonishing figure. And he was saying, and he was boasting about it. He was saying like, the ANC doesn't distribute wealth, we distribute wealth. I was like, hang on a second. So you're telling me that all the people who vote for you are having their money given away for free to people who vote against you? Doesn't seem very smart. So let's get into this. I had to break this up into 4 essays on my Substack because I put a lot of little graphs. So I did there's one tiny little error I want to mention ahead. I think it was 2009 on the national voting. I plugged in a 1 where there was supposed to be a 2. So there's 1 year where the DA does get a relatively high mark, for a high percentage in the national electoral outcomes. I think it might be their largest ever. But the basic formula remains the same. So that was pointed out to me by Robert King. So if you don't know who Robert King is, he's a very, very young member of the Vryheidsfront at the moment. But he's also associated with the CIAG, the Cape Independence Advocacy Group. And he's also involved a bit in the UK because he goes to university there. So he's involved a bit with like Turning Point and the Reform Party and things like that. Very, very, very sort of talented young fella. He recently had an article published in Biz News. So if you look him up, you'll see he's actually quite. I'm not muted, am I? If you tell me I'm not making sound, I am going to lose my mind. If anyone's listening, please tell me if you can hear me or not, because if I've been talking these past 5 minutes, without making a sound, I'm going to be very irritated. So somebody please tell me right now, am I working? No message. Oh, good Lord. Oh, God. Okay, great. Okay, we're good. No, it's because someone over here just said muted. So I was okay. Okay, good. We're all fine. Timo Boy, I recognize you from Twitter. Good to see you again. So let's go ahead with it. Let me do the screen share. Let's do part 1. So, which one was this one? Oh, yeah, that one's the measure. Okay, so I just call these ethnodemocracy because I mean, like, what else am I going to call it? So it's just the idea that sort of we vote in ethnic classes. It's really a super simple concept. I don't want to, like play super duper deep intellectual stuff with you. It's just people vote according to their race. It's not complicated. But it's the reason it's weird is because so many people refuse to recognize this fact. And it's also weird because people are so close in their ethnic voting patterns. It's like, it's really shocking. I'll show you now when we get, I think it's the second or third chunk. So don't be intimidated. I know it's broken into 5 pieces. You'll see the links in the description. But it's actually quite a short essay. It's just that there's lots of graphs, so Substack put a limit, so I had to break it up. So it's not going to take forever to do all 5 pieces. This should be a relatively normal length stream. But so let's go down here. So I said country votes according to race. So here in this graph, you'll see, I think it's 2006 actually. You get where we got a nice, I think where we got 27, because it's, I remember he was pointing out it was others 2006 or 2009. I think it might have been 2009. DA got 2006. Yeah, for a local election and so on. Anyway, getting back to reality. So the general pattern, even if the one of these dots was placed up here, as the person who corrected, as Robert King has corrected me. Anyway, even if you place one of the dots up here on the blue line, so that blue line represents National Party, Democratic Alliance, and Vryheidsfront added together. So this is not every party is represented on this graph. It's just Charterists, Zulu nationalists, and minority groups. So, well, the minority parties that have any like significant representation. So you can see the lines are more or less flat. I mean, the ANC has a bit of a curve, and there's almost a 10-point decline in the Charterists there at the top from 2009 to 2014. But it's like not a straight line. It's very sort of jingly jangly. You might notice the sort of up and down pulses there. For anyone who's not aware of this is just the way that national versus local elections go. So I've put national and local elections together just so that I can get like a nice smoother graph that takes all of the elections into account. And you'll notice, so the low points for the ANC are local elections, and the high points are national elections. So they really only get their sort of big electoral machine running at the nationals, and that involves stuff like, you roll out, you bus people to locations, you bring food, you bring T-shirts, you bring water, the youth league goes bananas, there's live events. So the ANC really got a massive machine going for national elections. They do at various protests too, but you really see it going into top gear for national elections. And at local elections, they don't really care so much, which in my opinion is a mistake, but on their part anyway. But I'm happy to let them make mistakes because I consider them enemies. What am I going to do? Anyway, national trends. So what I wanted to say is over here is that, you've got the DA and the ANC have both kind of passed their peak. And you wouldn't tell by the kind of energy you get from the DA. You'd think now that they're getting their shit together a little bit that they'd get more attention. But it's not really true. And the thing is that, as we'll see later, like provincially, they're not... provincially, they are... They're kind of nearing that 50% mark, and that's going to have consequences for things like Cape Independence. Again, I'll get into that. So, but what I thought was nice is this graph over here. So it took me it took a lot of effort to put this one together. So there are a couple of years where I had to there's a couple of years where I had to extrapolate based on sort of on like a basic growth rate principle. Some of the years in between here, particularly for local elections, because not all of those are publicly available. But generally speaking, this is possibly I haven't seen any other graph like this out yet. Now, this I should have updated the image on Substack, but I've got the updated version on the on the Excel spreadsheet. So basically, what's going on here is the red dotted line and the purple dotted line. Those are percentages, ratios. You read them on the right hand side over there. The solid lines, the green, yellow, and blue, you read them on the left hand side, and those are absolute numbers. Now, blue is just literally how many people turned up at the voting booth. The yellow line is how many voters were registered to vote, and the green line is just everybody in the country who is of the right age to vote, and is a citizen, right? So then what you do is dividing one by the other, you get the registration rate. That's, what percentage of the voting age population actually registered to vote. So if you go back to 1994, you got 100%. I think it's like it comes out as like 90 something percent. It was really obscene. So like everyone got registered to vote somehow. And then your turnout for the election was, like about 60 odd percent. The actual turnout percentage of people who percentage of the voting age population who voted. That's like that's above 80. That's about 80%, just above. So it's like a really, really ridiculously high turnout rate. I mean, there are questions hanging over the 94 election that I absolutely cannot get into because the information is not reliable. There's lots of rumors, and it would take a long time to research that. And I'd need the phone numbers of old retired civil servants who are probably hiding out in some South Coast retirement village somewhere. And I don't know that. Anyway, I mean, shit. When I was out helping the Vryheidsfront Plus with campaigning, I came across an old civil servant who was involved with the some lower down aspect of the nuclear weapons program. Like some of the stuff that comes out. Hey, yoy. Anyway, let's see if I've still got his number hanging about. If you'll remember me. Anyway, so the DA are. So I say over here that the DA are the most competent of the top three major parties. Well, that's obvious because the other two are, well, the ANC and the EFF, and the ANC has run everything into the ground. The EFF, the few moments they've gotten any bit of governance, they've made the ANC look like sharp and competent. So, yeah, I mean, that's obvious. I say some nice things about the DA because, well, why be rude? But, I have my problems with them. But they're not going to win. And so here we go. Here's the breakdown. So you saw at the top, you've got this nice fat graph over here. ANC, you got Charterists, minorities, Zulus. That's really simple, right? So you go down here. After you've seen how our voting percentages decline, it's gone down from like 80% to like down near sort of 30% now. Of the population are actually going to the polls. And during this time, the minority versus majority sort of slice has it's remained mostly static. So what I did for 2024 is I took all of the polls that were available for 2024 and I just averaged them. It's very crude, but I don't know. I mean, like, what else are you going to do? I mean, if you pick and choose, you're deciding which bias you're going to recognize. And I don't know. I'd rather just go with whatever. And I had a look for the last couple of elections just as a sort of rule of thumb, and it turns out that if you take all of the polls just before before the actual ballots arrive, it's usually off by like 2 to 3%. Sorry, 3 to 4%. Actually, I think it was. Where did I? Because I wrote that down. Yeah, no, it's 2 to 3. Okay, so you can really just sort of estimate the ANC will get a bit more. This graph looks a bit funny because I had to draw the ANC on the right hand side, so they're a dotted line, and you read their outcomes here on the right hand side, so it's like just under 50, just around 50. Like it's literally a hair's breadth under there. And then you read all of these other parties on the left hand side over here. I had to do this because if you put them all on the same side graph and they're on the same scale, then you just can't see the movement between all these groups. They just crawl along the bottom. So I just kind of had to do that to make it legible. But you can see some interesting stuff here. So the NP starts up right at the top there with just over 20% in 1994 in their first election, and the DP, as it was then, gets like single digits, a complete outsider party, matching the Vryheidsfront Plus, if you can believe it. That's the little green line on the bottom. So the NP take a nosedive, and by 2000 they're a nothing party. And they basically all their votes go to what becomes the DA. So the DA swallows them. The NP, as everyone knows, sort of split into people who went with the ANC and people who went with the DA. Although, as I remember correctly, it was more of their membership went into the ANC than into the DA. Why? Who knows? Anyway. Lots of unspoken old shenanigans there. So the IFP has seen a steady decline since they started out with just over 10%. They were the majority in KZN, and now they're, not much. But I think they're going to make a bit of a resurgence soon. We shall see. I mean, this is the thing. Your minorities sort of bump around this 20 to 25% window, and yeah, it doesn't do any better than that. So at the provincial trends, you see some interesting stuff. So, you've got KZN elections. This one was really nice because you've got something other than the usual majority-minority thing, which might get a bit dull after the repetition. I like seeing Zulu stuff. It's more exciting. So anyway, they start out as the majority in KZN in 94, and they keep that up until 2004. And I mean, look, the economy is doing well. You've got lots of foreign direct investment flowing in. It's the economy has got no internal restrictions either. You've got freedom of movement. Very good for the economy. In the meantime, institutions have been eroded. You've got major debt is about to be built, is being built up. Actually, that's not strictly true. I mean, Mbeki was actually fairly good at paying off debt, but he drew down very hard on our foreign currency reserves, basically depleting them completely. And then, of course, that catches up with the state later because they can't pay for the welfare systems, even with the cuts that he instituted from Mandela's very, very generous package, which was unsustainable. Eventually, they were going to have to borrow money to keep that up, and that exactly is what happened under Jacob Zuma. So what you can see over here, when Jacob Zuma takes over in 2009, you see this massive jump from they were just under 50% in the province. They leapt to nearly 65%, and correspondingly, the IFP goes way down. So this purple line on the bottom is an interesting little party that collapsed when it's called the Minority Front. Now, they are an Indian identity party. Their leader died, I think, in 2014 or something, and his replacement, who I think is his daughter, just doesn't have the political sort of muscle that he did, and so the party has never really recovered, which is a pity because they kind of need better representation. The DA aren't going to really the DA are still trying to focus on black interests rather than minority interests, which, I mean, black listeners, if you're here, you're probably not going to believe this. We'll get to it later, but yeah. So look, the big thing over here is you see this dotted line. So I added the IFP and the NFP together, and the NFP is a party that appears around 2011. So 2011, Zuma started a lot of shenanigans in 2011. So you've got the NFP launches in KZN, and I always suspect them of being some kind of there being an ANC backdoor because it splits the vote here. Then you've got he starts this deal. Now you can Google this if you just look up Zuma Gangs 2011, you'll find it. It's he did a deal with the sort of numbers gangs in Cape Town to get like votes, and also if you like, this is my understanding of it is also basically he gives them protection. And if you looked at the homicide rates, they bounced straight back up from they were on a steady decline all the way to 2011 in the Western Cape, and then they just go back up. So the other thing that he did is he started, and I mean this is only rumors that I have to go on like individual people who tell me stuff they've seen. Like I have an aunt who lives in Hermanus, and she was telling me that, I mean, she's a fairly well-informed person. Her husband's was a journalist and so on, and I mean, died a few years back. But in 2011, they got when the major influx started in the Western Cape. Not that there wasn't a big influx before, but it really, really kicked off after 2011. And she was telling me that they got cash payouts, and so many people showed up to pick up from the Eastern Cape, showed up to pick up checks and cash payouts in Hermanus, that the Standard Bank branch there ran out of cash in that month. So, I mean, we've had problems there ever since. But that's a story for another day. But basically, Zuma shenanigans 2011, right? So here we see the second party introduced in KZN that splits the Zulu nationalist vote. Now, the red line, the dotted line here is kind of what the IFP would be getting if there wasn't a split in the vote. That's actually probably would be a bit more than that, because once you split the vote, you undermine voter confidence as well. So yeah, you can see how much damage was done to the IFP by that. But once you get over here, 2019 is the last year that you've got. Well, it's not the last year that you've got Jacob Zuma because he was out by then. But so Jacob Zuma's left. This is the first year that you've got Cyril Ramaphosa in charge of an election. And 2021 is. Fuck, what's wrong with my brain today? Anyway, so, but you can see the bounce back after Jacob Zuma leaves. And that's because, well, Jacob is, Zuma is Zulu. Yeah, that's what he campaigned on. So you can see a nice collapse there. But yeah, so Gauteng, interesting stuff. I mean, look, KZN, who cares about the minority vote? I mean, the maximum minorities are going to get is the top of this little blue line. I mean, come on, let's not kid ourselves. 2016, they collapsed. What's his face? Minority Front completely, and so they swallow up all of those votes, and they get what, 15%. It's like, what are we talking about here? Zululand is not a place that minorities can get representation, and we'll go in depth on that later. So Gauteng, this is nice. This is a nice, fun one. Again, I did the thing with ANC dotted line because unlike KZN, they didn't really have competition until very recently. So yeah, you got 94, very easy win. So again, read the ANC's dotted line on this side. So that is your 60% mark, and you've got the ANC over here just under 60%, and then topping out at just under 70. And then they begin their decline from around 2009 because, Joburgers are much more pragmatic. They don't care about all of this Zulu nationalist nonsense. And then, there's more I mean, from what I can tell, there's a bit more voter apathy over there. But I mean, the thing is, I don't know. I mean, there's a study that I referenced in this article, which I can't actually show anyone, and I know. It's supposedly it's like someone commented when I tried to do this stream the first time before I had to bail. They said that how outrageous it is, that I'm referencing a study I can't show you guys, but I can't show you guys. The person who showed it to me was not supposed to even share it, so I can't get them into trouble now. But essentially, it's an internal study that was done by the DA for I think it just concerns Cape Town, so I can't tell you about Joburg specifically, but it's an interesting little data point. They said that I think it was 45% of the voters in the last election were white people. And that's really interesting because I mean, like the proportion of the city that's actually white, it's like it's like 20% or something. So I think the thing is that if we can measure that as us punching like twice above our weight everywhere, more or less, like let's say we have twice the rate of voter attendance, that would explain a lot. That would explain a lot because I mean, I sort of keep that in mind going forward because you have this declining voter participation. You don't have people crossing the voters' lines. I mean, I'll show you just an excerpt of a study that was done by it was Tony Leon, Ryan Kutsia, and I can't remember the other guy, but it was done for the DA, and they showed that basically every jurisdiction, black people, no more than 10% of them will vote for the DA anyway. And it's been the same for election after election after election. So for my part, it's like the only thing that explains the shift is that you've split the black vote. So I'm going to the EFF, and then a lot of them are just deciding not to vote. They're deciding to stay home. And then the only way you can explain the minority score staying the same, even though minorities are actually decreasing as a portion of the demographics, is if they're voting harder or the blacks are voting softer. So that explanation is the only thing that makes sense to me, is that there's greater voter participation amongst minorities and probably whites, given what I'd seen. Anyway, so now for the Western Cape was really interesting because there's, as I say here, I summed up the results of the Coloured Identity parties. So that's Patricia de Lille's good party. They're going to really hate being called a Coloured Identity party, but I'm sorry, for the most part, that's what they are. You've got Gayton McKenzie's party, the Patriotic Alliance, definitely a Coloured Identity party. I don't think you'd be insulted if I said that. And Fadil Adams, Cape Coloured Congress, yeah, 100%, right? So I just added those all up. So they're the little brown line over here. And then you've got the Vryheidsfront+, it's a green line on the bottom. And the Charterists, I keep using this phrase and I haven't explained it to anyone yet, but that's ANC, EFF, COPE, etc. It's anyone who follows the Freedom Charter. I'd include PAC if they mattered, but they don't matter, so I'm not bothering. I mean, the percentage is like it's a rounding error. Yeah. So you've got this over here. So the Charterists, if you add all of them together, they don't break 50% at any point in the Western Cape. At no point. So they've never had majority representation here, and they governed in coalition for a bit in the city, but they never really ran the show at the provincial level. And then you've got a little bit of Afrikaner identity at the beginning, and then now more recently. And Coloured Identity, you get a little bit of like Patricia de Lille during her big rise over here, and then she gets absorbed into the DA, and they really do well. And then she leaves, and then you've got the Patriotic Alliance and the Cape Coloured Congress coming in, and so now you've got three Coloured Identity parties, and then you've got like all these like little local regional parties that only contest. Hello. You do know you're interrupting something, right?
Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking for Jamie's bottle.
It won't be in here, dear.
Sometimes it is.
So that's my sister-in-law looking for my son's milk bottle. What beer is that? Someone says that is a Devil's Peak something or other. I didn't purchase this. My mother-in-law left them in the fridge. Yeah. Don't worry. If anyone's leaving comments or questions, I'll get to them mostly at the end. But please feel free to ask for any like clarifications or anything if you got any, or any if you just got like Defender Puma over here has got a little contribution about Hermanas. Any of that stuff will be welcome. So the last little thing before I move on to the next clump of stuff is that so we've got a guy called Davy Scholz. Davy Scholz, he I can't remember what he does for a day job, but what he does online is he collects all of the by-election laws so that you can get like in-betweeny data for what's going on in the country between the elections. And it's fairly useful. I mean, you see interesting stuff sometimes. So he's done some in looking at the DA and the Vryheidsfront nationally, and there are some little trends. So over here you get, I mean, look, there's a fairly decent margin of error because you don't know what the national representation is. He tries to narrow the stuff down a little bit. I think what might be better is if you take although this would be very tedious work, but I think it might be worth it to aggregate all of the by-election data and have a look. But we'll see. Anyway, so you get so when he talks about white Afrikaans words, he's talking about. So I took it from an article that's linked over here. Again, all of these essays are linked in the description. So the white Afrikaans words over here, you're getting, okay, DA dominates. When he means white Afrikaans, is most of the people who are voting there are going to be white Afrikaans. Most of them are colored. And this one, white DA in white English areas is like, come on, what's an Anglo going to vote for except the DA, right? Anyway, so yeah, so the Afrikaners, it's very recently they've decided that they're getting a bit tired of the DA and they don't trust them. Okay, so you see this. I mean, here I helped campaign for the Vryheidsfront Plus, and they knocked. I think here in Paarl they moved. It was a huge swing. I think we knocked the DA down from like 80-something% down to like 40-odd%. It was just like a ludicrous swing. So like people are fairly pissed off with the DA in the colored community. I mean, in the Afrikaans community, colored community a bit too, but I think it's different. I mean, see over here, you're seeing the DA bouncing around a little bit. The ANC is definitely going down, and I think and the PA are sweeping up a lot of the residual votes. So the PA is sort of absorbing bits and pieces from everywhere. So I think what they're doing, everyone's sort of there's one part where you can say, oh, they're eating into the DA. I think what's happening is they're absorbing all of the colored people who don't feel like they have anyone to vote for. I think that's what's it. So okay, and then this is just the rest of the article linked above shows other trends, which I'll get to later. Okay, so now let me share the next one, part 2. So now this one was really interesting. I just thought I love this really goofy expression on Mr. Brink's face. I mean, YouTube thumbnails are not friendly to the man, are they? He always looks like he's trying to suppress like an extraordinary amount of like petulant anger. Like he always looks like he's gonna like throw a strop any minute. But this one just makes him look a bit goofy, so I thought I'd go with that one. Anyway, I shouldn't be mean to him. He's actually a very good administrator, but I struggle to have sympathy for politicians. Anyway, so what I've said over here is that the DA have hit a ceiling. That's the main argument of this little section. So okay, they're not the only party that's losing support. A lot of other people are as well. Even the EFF recently has started to go down. So we know this. Like nobody's trusting mainstream vibes. But so the only reason the DA has been successful in the face of their stagnation and demographic change, white people leaving the country and black people growing a lot more, is that blacks abstain from the ballot at far higher rates than whites. And here's where I go, sorry, you got to trust me on this, But as I explained, it's like it sort of stands to reason when you look at demographic change, known rates of racial commitment to various parties, and so on. But anyway, so the causes of the Liberal Party's woes are all too obvious, and they should really have seen it coming. So you've seen the last post, so whatever. Now the DA did manage to win a fair amount of black support in a few places, most notably in Gauteng, where they looked ready to break through the 25% minority demo ceiling for good. But they didn't. So here's my argument is in this section is basically that the reason the DA haven't consolidated their gains here is that they couldn't actually affect change. So everyone gave the DA a chance, and it's happened in Nelson Mandela Bay as well. So it's not just a Gauteng phenomenon, right? So, and Nelson Mandela Bay, I have a friend who I haven't called in a long time, who I need to speak to at some point. But she worked for the municipality there, and she was in the middle of a lot of things. And I got the impression of just how painful it was to run the show there, with the coalition, with so many corrupt and backstabbing buggers, and how much sabotage the ANC was capable of inflicting on the ruling coalition in that municipality, so that basically there was nothing that they really wanted to get done got done. And I mean, it's really, really sad to watch, because they just pull all kinds of shenanigans out of their arse. I mean, they sabotaged infrastructure. They shut down public meetings. They used the legal department to tweak evergreen contracts so they could keep looting even while they were out of office. It was extraordinary. So Nelson Mandela Bay was a farce. And I mean, you see the same tricks again in Gauteng municipalities, which the DA and their coalitions managed to get hold of. And I mean, the thing is that the DA, I mean, I'll just read what I said here. So this has meant that all of the big attempts at reform were massively frustrated, and few citizens got to see real, tangible, and undeniable change. And then they showed that they struggled to work together. So they treated their coalition partners as outsiders and underlings, and couldn't stop micromanaging Herman Mashaba. So Mashaba is, of course, not an experienced politician, and his short record isn't squeaky clean, but the tight control the party executives place over their appointments makes creative and nimble strategy difficult unless it moves leftward and is therefore safe for media consumption. You see, I mean, Mashaba is like, anti-immigration and so on, and very law and order and stuff. And the DAs start getting heart palpitations every time they think, oh, we don't want to be thought of as we're not conservatives. So, crazy stuff. Anyway, so Mashaba breaking away attracted a lot of DA talent who was sick of this micromanagement. Athol Trollope as well. And some who are just sick of the sleaze. John Steenhuisen snaking the wife of Michael Beaumont has turned into one of the longest one-sided political feuds in recent memory. I shouldn't poke too much fun at Michael Beaumont, but I can't help but think that might fuel much of his animosity, because he's one of the most fervently attached members of Mashaba's Action SA. I mean, he seems happily married with someone else right now, and I wish him all the best, but I don't think you could kind of, I mean, I wouldn't forget something like that, So, yeah, there's a lot of nonsense that goes on in political parties behind closed doors that doesn't, you think it's not political, but, it has an effect on things. Anyway, but so this beef isn't the only reason coalitions fail. The DA, by all accounts, has been utterly intransigent and insists on dictating terms regardless of whether other small parties are willing to put up with it. The consequence is, of course, chaos and loss of control of the cities. They aren't entirely to blame, however. The horse trading that goes on can be very seedy, and smaller parties are often very mercantile and easy to bribe to switch sides. So this is something the DA should have learned from Nelson Mandela Bay, the story that demonstrates that the rise of Action SA can't be blamed for the drop in support. So I'll show this now. This is a general trend, the chaos and paralysis of coalition politics and the DA's inability to negotiate their way through it. I mean, this is staggering. So Zilla was in a BizNews interview, and she said that they were manipulated. But like, I thought about that. I was like, yeah, but that's politics. That's like saying, oh, they outmaneuvered me in a business deal. Yes, but that's how you do business. You've got to maneuver. This is politics. This is the game. So if you're not shrewd enough, you can't say, I deserve to win. I deserve to rule because I'm the least shrewd in the room. Doesn't work like that. I'm sorry. Anyway, the coalition effect, let's call it that, is visible in every DA minority metro so far. So it's Nelson Mandela Bay, Johannesburg, Pretoria, Tshwane, and Ekurhuleni. So Nelson Mandela Bay, you see over here, you got rising support up until 2006. Everyone goes, whoa, DA! And then they get in charge and things don't change, and the chaos is just like on every gossip page. And then everyone just goes, yeah, whatever. Johannesburg, they're rising. Oh, really excited. Oh, okay. No, never mind. Pretoria, same here. Ekurhuleni, same result. And, here we go. So rather than incorporate the newcomers into a grand coalition that can act as a bulwark in the ANC, so what they did afterwards is that they just continually smashed all of their coalition partners in the media. They just bashed them. It's like, a vote for them is a vote for the ANC. It's just not, it's so immature. So they tried to remedy this a bit, and they're now pushing the Moonshot Pact, but that comes after like several of their leaders, Jordan Hill-Lewis, Helen Zille, John Steenhuisen, and Solly Msimanga have all come out. They all came out personally in support of coalition with the ANC, right? They're saying, we should really consider it. Hey, that's like a pretty sound idea, bro. And then, of course, this polls badly, and a lot of people inside the party are getting conniptions. So the exco gets together and decides, actually, no, we can't actually sell this to the public. So we're going to have to go for the Moonshot Pact. So now they're playing pretty with, now they're mugging for the camera with all of the other opposition parties as if they're friends. So yeah. Anyway. But I mean, here's the thing. A lot of members of the public, and maybe some of you among them, sort of got the impression that there's no real difference between one party and another. Like, it doesn't matter. I mean, that's a killer, because the DA doesn't have a separate ideological message. Both the ANC and the DA say, we are for their constitution. This is the system. They're both status quo parties. They're not for radical change. And everyone looks at the system and says, if there's any change that needs to come, it has to be bloody radical. So it's obvious to me that this is not going to work. But I thought it was it's just sort of interesting to track how bad the DA's strategy is, because this section I subtitled "Why You Should Never Turn Your Back on Your Base," and I mean here we've got the notorious Mmusi Maimane. So the DA's base is kind of splintering. They've got Afrikaners going one way and coloreds going another, and it's not enough. It's not like a complete, it's not a complete collapse, but it's eating at the edges. and because their majority in the Western Cape is only 53%. If there's a big upset in the coming election, which I think there will be, then they are looking at an absolute catastrophe, because they only need to lose another couple of percentage points in this province, and then they have to go into coalition. And all of the parties that they could go into coalition with, that they're not completely allergic to, want Cape independence. So you've got actually the Cape Coloured Congress won't make the threshold, but you've got the Vryheidsfront Plus. They definitely do. ACDP want a referendum. And yeah, no, it's who else have they got to go into coalition with? Another charterist party, good PA. It's not going to happen. They're going to use the Vryheidsfront Plus. Like, otherwise, I mean, like, if they let the ANC into governing this province, then they'll never recover. They'll be gone tomorrow, right? Because they can play those shenanigans at the national level. If they sell out the Western Cape, they are dead. It's like, this is their base. But I mean, look, I wouldn't put that kind of stupidity past them. Anyway. Beg your pardon. So here we go. The ebony ceiling. So the DA's real woes begin with the event of Mmusi Maimane. Noticing that the party had negligible black support, certain managerial elites in the party, namely Ryan Coetzee and Tony Leon, aimed to transform the party base into a real universal platform to rival the ANC. So this didn't go well at all. So if you go to this article, there's a link to their after action report. So I just included this little table. That's how many black people, what percentage of the black population voted DA anyway. And like, you look at go down to the national level here. This is the bold at the bottom, 2000 to 2019, and you've got 4.95, like the highest point they got in 2016, 5.9% of the black population voted for them. It's like, what are you doing? And they sort of thought cornering the black vote would do something, and they've really been campaigning for a long time to get black people to vote for them, but it's not happening. I mean, because like the ANC can show loyalty to black people the way that the DA can't. The DA are like, you're secretly apartheid, you want to bring it back. So many people believe this, right? And you talk about the Western Cape, you got black areas are very poor because, well, they're squatter camps. Of course they're going to be poor. And then people just sort of think, well, the DA only serve white people. And I mean, this is misguided for a number of reasons. The problem is that it's almost impossible to actually service these communities. You've got a lot of saboteurs involved. The land invasions are happening so fast that no one can keep up with them. But the DA are genuinely trying to give services to, squatter camps. And they're like formalizing the street addresses and doing bin days and things like this. It's like they're really formalizing land invasions as quickly as they can. And they're doing massive free services of all kinds that cost a lot of money for taxpayers. But it's it's not. No one's voting for them. It doesn't help because everyone looks at them and And the thing is that once Mmusi Maimane got in charge of the party, he came from nowhere. He's a preacher, and he had no real political experience, and very shallow guy, doesn't understand policy, very vain, very promiscuous, it's just everyone sort of saw him as a puppet. And after having him for a little while and realizing that the guy didn't really believe in any liberal values, he just sort of figured, well, we can do what the ANC does, but without the corruption, which is like, people just don't understand this. Like, the ANC's policies make corruption almost inevitable and inescapable if you want actually anything to function. It's like anything to happen at all. It's anyway. I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole right now. But basically, they failed to gain a new base and pissed off their existing base because everyone just figured, oh, okay, now you're the ANC light, right? Because they started saying, well, we can do BEE, but just maybe like a little bit, like tweak the numbers, you know? And everyone was going, nah, bugger this. So now we've got Cape Independence. Now that happened, when it got big was actually under lockdown, and it's mostly a result of a group called Cape Exit, although Cape Exit has no idea what to do with their money, their numbers that they have, because they basically have collected a whole bunch of online petitions effectively, but it's like a mailing list because they've got the database includes like people's ID numbers and contact details and so on. They've sort of stagnated about 800,000, and they still have some silly ideas about how this translates into independence. But anyway, 800,000 people signing on and saying, I'm behind it. Like voting age population as well. That's kind of big. And so all of this sentiment really sort of puts the heat under the DA. So they start moving on various things. So several radical here we go. The arrival of Cape Exit, largely put on the map by Phil Craig at the CIAG and Des Palm at Cape Exit, has changed the scope of the sort of solutions the public are willing to entertain. Several radical left-wing policies, such as the Western Cape Education Department reforms, to include transgenderism in the curriculum, as well as fostering anti-white blood libel on students in the form of critical race theory lectures for high schoolers. Anyone who wants to know about this, look up the thing that happened at Fishhook High School. This has alienated the conservative base. Arrogance, indifference, and nepotism and common or garden corruption has also alienated regular folk, particularly Afrikaners and coloureds, who have started to shop around for alternatives, usually a combination of local parties at the municipal level and ethnocentric parties, Vryheidsfront, Cape Coloured Congress, Patriotic Alliance, Good Party. The ACDP has also expanded their Christian base, as has Al Jamar their Muslim following. The trouble with this is that no common messaging exists that can reverse the decline of national minority ethnic support in the Cape. The only such brand with this potential is Cape Independence. The only one with potential for growth that unites all the different sort of groups. Although, let's be frank, the people who are most desperate to leave are, white people. But many voters are still too afraid of the ANC taking over to try any alternative party, so the splintering remains at the edges. Yet clipping the edges of the coin are enough to devalue the species. In Gauteng, it is Action SA who is debasing their currency, drawing black liberals and disgruntled Anglos into surprisingly effective yet clumsy political machine, tackling issues the Liberal DA wouldn't touch, like illegal immigration. The DA has only a 53% majority in the Cape, down from around 2/3 at their height. The next election could see them forced into a coalition government. Right, so here's an interesting thing. Last year or so has seen a rapid shift to a more conservative signalling and greater political activity. The DA have placed an active and talented young mayor in charge of Cape Town, who for once is using his legal advisors as weapons of efficiency rather than as risk avoidance counselors. So that's important. So there's a legal advisory body in the city, and generally speaking, the mayor goes to them, hey, can we do this? And then they go like, no, we can't do that because it's in that law. And Jordan Hill-Lewis is quite smart, and he basically says, look, I don't pay you to read the laws because I can read the laws. I'm not stupid. I pay you to find a way to get done what I want done. So go out and be creative. Well, that's nice. So he's gotten a few things through. They've started to get a move on with, they hired this guy, but I can't remember his name. He's a young, gay, colored fella. I forget his name. It's not Emil Langenhoven, is it? I don't know. But anyway, the really, really smart and passionate conservationist. They hired him to be something important in the city, and so they've finally gotten in large part as a result for this guy's pressure, they're starting to actually get like the pollution issue sorted out. So for years, the DA was just dumping sewage into the bay. So now they're actually thinking about treating it, get like treatment plants and things like this. So, yeah, there's some good things happening under Hill Lewis. So I don't want to bash him too hard, but there's things I can criticize him for. Anyway, so Alan Winde has pushed for electrical projects to wean the province off independence on Eskom, but it's very late in the day for him to be doing it. And so it's like in 2 years, they'll have like 700 megawatts. It's like, good Lord. It's like drops in the bucket. Like they're not going to resolve load shedding. They'd be quicker at resolving load shedding if they just, blew up the power lines connecting the Western Cape to the rest of the country's electrical grid. I mean, Anyway. So, National Party have also gotten serious about non-racialism, or apparently, and have even grown some apparent testicles when opposing BE and affirmative action are concerned. But I can fill you on why that's not the case later if you're interested, but I'm just going to move on. Going as far as to encourage people to disregard the relevant laws. But they're not going to do it themselves. But commentary often focuses on how quotas have completely banned some minorities entirely from employment in various provinces. So you can see this is a little press release from the DA's own website. So what's happened is that they've got like quotas for various races, and in some provinces it went to like 0. Particularly in Limpopo, it was 0 for coloreds and Indians, and I think like 0.5% or something ridiculous for white people. Cape of Hard Cope. But much of this is in an effort to contain the Cape independence movement. Now, I don't like most people are going to think, okay, yeah, but what does this mean? Like Jack Miller and his little party, they didn't perform anything at the elections. But the thing is, it's the support for Cape independence is a very, very large, like somewhere between 1/2 and 2/3 of the population at least support a referendum, like the idea of a referendum. If I speak to people, like most people that I speak to, they'll if they're against it, it's because they think like it's never going to work. That's like the biggest obstacle. It's not. And from speaking to people in the movement, that's generally what I get as well. So it says here, so around 2/3 of this of the DA's base support secession, but the leadership, I mean, the DA supporters, 2/3, but the leadership is radically opposed to it. So this creates a conundrum because they can neither openly oppose efforts for increasing autonomy, nor can they wholeheartedly embrace them without losing a great deal of their ethnic base at a national level through secession. Because, I mean, think about it. Well, what is the DA's chunk of the vote if you take away the Western Cape? Well, it's, So this is why they've finally made moves to appear like they care about their manifesto. So non-racialism and federalism have been on their manifesto since year dot, but they don't care because it doesn't matter. It's just like an idea to them. We might think about doing it once we get power. But if you listen to Helen Zille and take her seriously, she doesn't care about federalism. She really wants an extremely centralized government that cannot be held to account in any way, provided she's in charge. That's the impression I get from her. And it's like a lot of the DA members are very, very in on this. Like Alan Winde as well. He's very, actually, I shouldn't bash him. He actually said that if Cape Independence won a referendum or the DA lost their majority in the province, he would resign. So I think clearly the man's got at least some sort of sense of integrity. But I think most of the rest of the party are very sort of keen on having and maintaining control. And I'm not sure they know exactly what they want to do with it. I think they have some political projects they really have in mind that they're very keen on, but I don't think they have any radical change planned. I mean, it's like some privatization, sure, but they're not going to fix the country long term. It's pretty much budget balancing stuff. Eventually, they're going to lose as well. Anyway. So they have to prove independence isn't necessary by actually doing something. So after trying to woo black voters by offering them token black leadership, BEE light, and massive handouts, they realize that not only do black people not care, these policies are now eating away at their base. So, I mean, they've also gotten too comfortable, and the service quality of service delivery has declined. My own town is not doing so lacquer. But being obviously better than the ANC and having no real coloured competition and being comfortable with the liberal stigma against Afrikaners, like Fraser van Plus, they have defaulted to sort of arrogant dismissal of criticism, at least until quite recently. But so, and then I show the little sort of appearance of, identity in their splits in their base. And so, trouble with this pivot is how it's played out lacks conviction, and most of it's for show. The latest federalism bill is written to try and neutralize arguments for the People's Bill, which would the People's Bill. People's Bill is a bill that is sitting in the provincial legislature at the moment. It's tabled by the Vryheids van Plus. The CIAG lobbied for it to be placed on the floor, and they were really trying to get the DA to back it, but the DA were hard against it. They were like all cagey about it and saying, we'll do it if you change this and this and this language. And at a certain point, it's like, yeah, but if you remove that language, then all of its legal teeth are gone. So the Vryheids van Plus put it on the bill. It basically just says, well, the Western Cape people are a people in their own right because of these reasons. And these in line with these treaties that we recognize in that the national government has signed in international law, these aspects of the constitution, we use this to demand basically any powers we bloody like from the national government, more or less. And it's a very, very serious and lethal piece of legislation, absolutely profound. The DA, in order to crush this, they managed to get their own bill on the list and put it for and made it a high priority. And it's called the Western Cape Provincial Powers Bill. So it's got a kind of similar name if you abbreviate it. And then it's also looking for to devolve powers, but all of the powers they ask for are something like, well, we can have like a research body and they can like really look very hard for like powers that we can like get back. And then, but basically all of it's like asking the ANC for permission. So it's like pointless. And they're using this to try and water down support for the People's Bill, which is probably going to work to some degree because most of the provincial MPs they don't really read what they sign. I mean, shit. I mean, Debbie Schaefer, when she signed in that, she signed off on that sort of woke sort of education policy for the Western Cape. I mean, I spoke to someone inside the party, and they said, "Well, yeah, she clearly didn't read it because she doesn't think like that at all." And I'm like, "Well, what the hell's going on in your party that you've got people passing stuff they don't even read? You just got handed off to some apparatchik who's dreaming of a placement at UNESCO or something." Anyway, so the DA bills are polite. So blah blah blah. Skip. I've already covered this. So they'll end up in a situation where they've delayed the necessary groundwork for independence while stoking support for it, which is a recipe for deeper social divisions and also for electoral threats from the until now rather fractured independence movement. But look, I'm not going to tell you exactly what's going to happen, but I'll tell you that come next year, Cape independence is not going to be a nothing part. Is not going to be just a fart in the wind electorally. They're going to mean something. And the DA better catch a wake up. So the Western Cape Provincial Powers Bill is a great piece of legislation. Okay, I've explained that. But I mean, the thing is that the CIG actually supports the Western Cape Provincial Powers Bill because, look, if you have the legal authority to get the powers and you've created an institution that actually is mandated to seek powers that you're legally capable of getting, those two bills put together, fucking dynamite. It means you get maximum acceleration for devolution of powers. That means within like a year or two, you've devolved every major power in the governance power towards the province. And if you hold a referendum after that period, everyone's just going to be like, yeah, let's go. And you don't even have to build any new institutions. You got them all running. Easy peasy. So, and I mean, here's the interesting thing. I mean, I'll do an extra stream on this at some point, but because I did a big study on what powers are actually available. Like, it's an obscenely large study, so I'll have to do several streams on it. But essentially, there's an interesting feature of South African law, which I believe it's in the Constitution, and it says, sorry, it's been a while since I looked at this, but it's if you confer power, if the government confers a function to the provincial or municipal level, it has to also confer the budget to do that, to fulfill that function. So, like, at the moment, the province, like, it doesn't raise any of its own tax money. It gets all of its tax money is distributed from the national government. So, but because of this feature of the Constitution, if the Western Cape province gets control of all these new features, the national government has to fund it. It's like, anyway. Yeah. So, yeah, okay, blah, blah, blah. I've covered most of that. But I mean, it's crazy. It's just like it's $100 bills lying on the ground, and people are like, oh, bruh, did you like sweep the strip today? Like, what is going on in this country? But this is South Africa. I don't know. Like, everyone's just being a muhu most of the time. So, got one more. Got two more. So yeah. Don't worry. This one's kind of fun. So this one I shifted tone a little bit, and I sort of said, well, okay, cool. I mean, we know what the rebel action is for the Cape. So what is your dissident action in the rest of the country if you're a minority? Well, not much unless you're Afrikaans. I'm going to tell you that much. But the Afrikaners do have some buttons they can press, and if everyone gets behind them, they can benefit a little bit. At any rate, so I'm just going to read here. As a senior official party in the party explained it to me once, the Vryheidsfront Plus has until now been divided across three constituencies: the Cape, the North, and Orania. I don't know why they divided this way. It's very silly. I mean, Orania isn't all that significant for you. But anyway, the Cape aims for autonomy, Orania for greater self-determination, and the North for a better deal in local admin. But this seems to me to be an unnecessary division, since all three share the same theme, greater self-determination. So this is of vital importance for minorities of all stripes, facing aggressive racial discrimination from a majoritarian political behemoth that is basically undefeatable, since black people on the whole do not vote for minorities, no matter how generous the overtures are. But this theme of greater self-determination can be extended to embrace all minorities, Anglo, Afrikaner, coloured, Indian, and extend the party's reach into the East too if they are smart and proactive about it. So while the party still prioritizes Afrikaners, which is understandable, there's really not much time left for any of this electoral stuff to matter, the aim for the present, I believe, should be maximizing participation and leverage in wresting power from the national government. And this will mean serious cooperation across various organizations that until now have only had informal ties. That's Solidariteit AfriForum, the whole broader Solidariteit movement, and the political minority representatives. So you need to get those together. And there's some other sort of financial aspects to this that I have an idea for as well. But let's go on. After all, national control is not just a moonshot, it's a pipe dream. But local control is a goal that lies right before us and can protect minorities from the decay and violence visible everywhere. Gated communities are not enough and are not a realistic solution for all. Power must be devolved and consolidated for long-term gains, and there are concrete means of achieving it. But first we must take the position that the achievement of autonomy is paramount and pursue the consolidation of local powers by any means necessary and unapologetically. This means adopting the stance of a policy wedge. That's what I'm calling it. So this is opposed to simply these policy-neutral, opportunistic kingmakers like the Patriotic Alliance. So they have no real grand strategy except give me stuff. So they enter into a coalition, say, I want that department and that department and that department because the tenders are nice. So that's what the PA does. There's always money disappearing in funny places when they get involved. So I understand why the DA don't like them. It is what it is. Anyway, so instead one should have a clear set of reformist goals that one uses to target the base of the party nearest to you. So the EFF plays this role fantastically with the ANC because they keep pushing them towards more radical left-wing economic policies and anti-white social policies, and they target the black youth. So this is the role of the EFF, and they're getting their leverage moment happening in the coming year. So for a minority interest party, there's a limited sphere of influence and a limited pool of voters. As part one of this series shows, party blocks function as censuses on identity groups. So as a result, the most effective strategy is to adopt a more radical approach, which directly challenges the leader of one's ethnic bloc, forcing them into a more radical position. So that's, you got to challenge the DA. And the thing is, this has a snowball effect over electoral cycles because when they employ your policies, it emboldens people who support your ideas and it makes your position more appealing. So this has happened with Cape independence and its effect on the DA's pretenses at federalism, which they have been forced to take seriously in order to contain their basis demands for self-determination. And so the more that the DA says we need to be self-determined, the more the Cape independence movement can say, yeah, exactly, we do. Let's go all the way. So you've shifted like the base of the argument along, right? So then that becomes the debate. Everyone has to outdo each other. So what is the DA going to say? Cape independence says, we need total control. And the DA says, well, we do want to allow the ANC some control because, like where does that argument lead? Anyway, so the Cape's not the only region that can benefit from a more aggressive policy wedge. So in 2019, the Workers' Union civic activist group Solidariteit launched a program known as Ankerdorpe or Anchor Towns. So it aims to promote the consolidation and concentration of Afrikaners in 30 different towns around South Africa where they form either a majority or a strong plurality. So in theory, this can be used to pool resources for common interest and electoral victories, strengthening the community against the chaos and depredations of our crumbling state. But there are a couple of shortcomings here. So these have solutions, but they require stronger cooperation with other institutions to overcome. First of all, there's a lack of capital. It's not so easy for businesses and residents to retreat to these areas. Oranje has also encountered this problem, but has already reached a solution. The community bank, OSK, has offered low-interest housing loans to Afrikaners who wish to relocate to Oranje. And that facilitates migration because, think about it. You can't get a decent priced home loan and you have to move to some place like Oranje where housing is in high demand. It's, and you don't know what you're going to do there necessarily. It's hard, right? So, look, they'll help you fit into the economy somehow. They're very proactive in that regard. But it's like if you've got a big loan to pay off, you need to be sure of what you're going to do. Anyway, long story short. So second, there's also a lack of political power. In many cases, these anchor towns still form like minorities within their broader municipal entities, leaving them incapable of determining the deployment of their resources and the quality of their services. Best example is Pretoria. So according to the 2011 census, the city itself is 48% Afrikaans and 16% English. But in the past decade, there's been a massive influx of Afrikaners to the area. But on the other hand, the municipal boundaries include several other huge urban settlement zones, which makes this white minority region, this white majority region, the minority in a 75% black municipality. It's absolutely crazy. They've included these completely different sort of urban sectors. And you can see this. Let's just zoom in on this so that you guys can see. You've got, so Pretoria is the city over here, right? You can see it. And Tshwane is all of this, right? So So these are on the left, you can see the ward results. The blue is for the DA and the green is for the ANC. And on the right, you can see what race they are. So here we go. So you got a very sort of mixed area over here up in the north. And yeah, so you can't really see anything other than, so you've got this little colored spot over here. But you just got white over here, this little sort of weird shaped thing. That's the white area. That's Pretoria for the most part. And you've got the dead center of the city where the capital is. That's fine. But let's say you decided that all of this blue area, we want to be on our own. Please leave us alone. We want to govern ourselves. And you don't even close borders. You don't do anything. You just say we want our own municipality. Okay. So, okay, unrealistic. Let's put that aside for a second. But in order for Afrikaners to take advantage of this plan, political parties aligned to their interest must take advantage of the power to redraw municipal boundaries. So the power to redraw the boundaries is divided between several layers of consultation. And the boundaries are decided by a panel selected by a cabinet minister. But the establishment of a municipality is in the hands of the MEP. So let's say you become you get a DA coalition, like an opposition coalition in charge of Gauteng, which is totally possible next election. I mean, pretty much everyone thinks it's going to happen. So you get Gauteng is taken over by the opposition, and now you've got a DAM MEP. They can just go, we're creating a new, you've got Tshwane, all right? We're creating a new municipality in the middle of it called Pretoria. Now, deciding the boundaries of that, that's going to be haggled between the provincial government and the national government. Now, but you can add heft to it. If you don't want to accept what the government's boundaries are, you can take them to court and argue for, what's it called? You can argue for your right to self-determination, which is in the Constitution and so on. But no government, no judge in this country is going to award that to a bunch of Afrikaners. There's no way, unless it's absolutely impossible to deny it. And so what they have to do is they have to find some other community to give the right to have their municipal boundaries redrawn on the basis of their self-determination right. On the basis of their right to self-determination. Give them a win in court, have that as a precedent, and then when you go to court and they say, you can't have this because it is like apartheid, then you say, oh, really? So this applies to black people, but not to us. That doesn't work. I'm sorry. It's the only way you're going to win that. So you can't, if you have the legal precedent for another group, that they cannot just on the basis of your race alone. That's not going to fly in our courts. As naive as that sounds, I promise you, they're going to have more than that. Anyway, so you just can't be the first. You can't do it without precedent. That's what I'm saying. But you can use that as leverage in the municipal boundary. Anyway, going on. So 2024 elections, that power's up for grabs, so it won't be easy. But anti-Chartist coalition can win. Right. Yeah, so I described that whole process. And then for the time being, Solidarity and AfriForum maintain a strict policy of avoiding divisions in the community. And so they don't endorse any political party, but they maintain a cordial relationship with the DA for obvious reasons. So it's very, very sensible. But what happens is the DA will piggyback on AfriForum's policies. The AfriForum will do all of these huge, like, legal campaigns to gain rights, and the Solidarity. I mean, Solidarity recently, like a few weeks ago, they actually broke employment equity. They broke affirmative action. So the ANC's recent their recent law that they passed, the recent version of the Employment Equity Act, was passed Parliament in 2020. It was only signed in a few months ago. Bear in mind, the DA voted for affirmative action back in 2013. Helen Zille's response is that they voted for it by mistake. Yeah, sure. All of your party in a coordinated bloc voted by mistake for the same bill. Anyway. So the 2020 version of this bill, because they give new ones every now and again, comes through, makes all of these really, really ridiculously strict quotas. It's got everyone in the country cocking their pants. And Solidarity sits down with the ANC at the CCMA. Everyone thinks, well, CCMA, I mean, that's just some peddling little court for doing labor arbitrations in the workplace. If you fire your maid and she takes you to the CCMA, what's going on? No, it's legally binding and has extraordinary reach. So what they managed to get the ANC to agree to is that, like, basically you can't fire anyone in order to meet the quotas. Okay, so everyone's job who's got a job now is safe. You cannot force any company who wants to hire has to take into account skills availability, the price on the market. Like, it was like the super broad language. After I heard it, I was like, nah, it can't be true. Fortunately, I have a friend who's a labor lawyer. Actually, a couple of contacts who are labor lawyers. So I went and spoke to them, and I was like, this can't be as good as it seems. But everyone was just like cucking themselves, because it was like, literally, they've made it so that in no circumstance is the Employment Equity Act actually enforceable because of that bargaining council agreement that they settled. It was absolutely extraordinary. And so the Solidarity, the way they settled it is they actually got the International Labor Union. Was it the International Institute of Labor? I can't remember what the acronym is, but it's like this global labor institute that belongs to the UN. They got the UN involved, and it's brilliant. It was a brilliant piece of maneuver. So they got the ANC to sit down the table, and they basically made it like you can't enforce. Oh, it was so beautiful. Anyway, after this, the DA comes storming through and says, "Oh, we're going to have a big rally and protest now. We don't want any more of this. Hey, guys, go away." What are they doing? Can't they just say thank you and move on? Oh, no, because then they'd look absolutely useless, which is what they are. Anyway. So the DA can't maintain a majority without coalition partners, and the Vryheidsfront is one of the anti-Charterist parties, has the ability to act as a policy wedge, campaigning against the DA within the Afrikaner community for a more aggressive and proactive stance on issues that affect them. Right. So in exchange for cooperation, the Vryheidsfront then has the capacity to negotiate on these policies. So with Pretoria returned to something like its original boundaries, it can increase its self-determination and autonomy, clean up the city, promote economic growth into the whole surrounding area. So in a relatively homogenous neighborhoods where residents are cooperative with collective trust agreements, road ownership can even be transferred, effectively transferring contiguous territory to an increasingly cohesive enclave in society. You can just start like deepening the autonomy until it's like almost a separate country, just with kind of open borders. Anyway, so taking back control is okay. So then what I talk about, so then I go a bit into what's going on with the colored nationalist parties, and I say basically they prefer being kingmaker because they can get like basically the legal equivalent of bribes, but they don't have any policies that they're really pushing. So I mean, their policies they sell to the public, but there's not really policies they negotiate for. Anyway, and then the reason that the thing is, and then I go into a little bit about how you've got to target colored communities a little bit, but that's very basic. If you want to win the colored community, you have to solve very, very basic issues: litter, water, safety. It's low-hanging fruit. So anyone who sorts that out, and I mean, like AfriForum can sort that out and then endorse any political party. I mean, it's like, we're working with these guys, vote for them. It's like, if you have a coordinated strategy across civil society and political parties, you can achieve amazing stuff. But it's like you have to get people to do it. It's, yeah. My basic point is that if you combine the anchor town policies with like allegiances with, DA, Vryheidsfront, those lot, you can basically carve off a whole bunch of little towns. Like, they're not going to be very big. I mean, Pretoria is the only really big one that you can win. Maybe like a part of Ekurhuleni or something, but you can't get so much done if you can't get so much done if you don't work across these boundaries, because there's legal issues, and then there's capital issues, and there's political issues, and that's the way it works. So at the end of the day, so we've got this last bit is that I'm going to be talking about is come on, Zululand. So ethnodemocracy again. Here we go. So this one is actually the saddest one, because this is just like why minorities are screwed. But it's also about the Zulus. So I talk about the 2021 riots, Phoenix massacre. I talk about this little incident where the DA tried to. So I mean, one has to remember that whites and Indians were targeted with basically pogroms to accelerate the riots. And a guy called Mike Waters. Mike Waters decided that to do this little campaign afterwards for local elections, and it's it was great, because like the local communities defended themselves, backed off all of the violent rioters, and but then everyone bollocked him in the press and in the party, and the party didn't stand behind him, and he resigned. So, So, I mean, it's certainly an edgy position. They should have really gone for it, because it was very popular. So, but then I talk a bit about the Minority Front. They collapsed. Then you got ANC, the KZN ethnic voting blocks. Red is Zulu, green is Charterist, and blue is minorities. Hello, sweetie.
What are you doing?
I'd say another 15, 20 minutes.
I've been feeling really bad for the last hour.
Okay.
I've been feeling very nauseous and just not well.
You want me to call it? You want me to call it a day, sweetie?
No, I'm basically just making an excuse for why I haven't started dinner.
No. Why do you have to? Don't worry.
I'm just not. I'm feeling really.
No, don't worry about it. I just look. I'm gonna come out. I'm gonna make some green beans and stuff, and we'll just eat. Okay.
Yeah. All good. You finish up. Thank you.
All right. She would be mortified if she knew that she was on camera, but okay. So the opportunity for pushing the ANC under 50%, it's there. So the ANC is like, it's hanging on that flipping 50%, and like the IFP is on an upward trend, and DA is stable. They're not doing that great, but they're stable, right? It's good. So anyway, so here's, I just want to show you how bad it is. So it's a bit of Adrian Frith's map. Please look up Adrian Frith, because his maps are fucking gorgeous. He basically takes all of the census data and he turns it into these dot maps, so you can like check out where all the different ethnicities and voters and languages and religions and everything. Lovely demographic data. It's beautiful stuff. Lovely high res. Please go. If you've ever seen like an image of South Africa's map with like different ethnicities and languages and stuff on it, Anyone, it's almost certainly been compiled by Adrian Frith. He's a one-man like autistic legend. So I've done this where I basically superimposed one of his maps over a road map, like one of Google's maps. It kind of makes it a bit difficult to see because I'm a bit boomerish with this stuff, but it just allows you to see like the labels of the different areas and the main highways and stuff. So these sort of blue-green areas, that's where your white and colored communities are, because they tend to be mixed into each other. There's very few places like, the Bluff and so on where white people are really sort of the majority, and there's a couple of little colored spots down here, but for the most part, it's like whites and colors sort of bleed into each other's areas in Durban. The people who are really homogeneous are Indians and blacks. So the black areas are it's just black people. The Indian areas is almost just Indian people. I mean, like Newlands, you get a bit of a three-part thing where it's mostly Indian, but there's more colors in the north, more black people in the northwest. And Phoenix is over here, and I kept the highlight on it from Google Maps because I just wanted to point out that's where the clash happened over here. And so it's just not, it doesn't look good over there. You can see that you're kind of surrounded. And then I did one for the province as well, so you can see the red spots are where you got concentrations of Indians. A little bit on the coast, about Durban, Pietermaritzburg, Ladysmith, and Newcastle, but in Richards Bay. But it's very sparse. It's like not great. So, I mean, and if you talk about like percentages, like where you've got like critical mass, Indians have only got 5 areas in the province in which they form populations above 10%. That's Durban, 24%, Newcastle, 20%, Richards Bay, 18%, Ladysmith, 15%, and Hlali at 15%. So, I mean, this thing, Dolphin Coast, is actually Belito. But anyway, of these 5, only 4, Durban, Newcastle, Richards Bay, and Hlali, have a near even black to minority ratio. Belito also falls into this category, but it's only like 5.4% Indians. It's mostly white people, a lot of Portuguese. So a similar pattern emerges for white people. So several towns have a sizable white plurality, some even have a white minority, but all of the towns are parts of municipalities that include enormous black populations from the surrounding area. And that means that the communities have an overwhelming electoral defeat in every election, just guaranteed. So there's no option for meaningful minority representation anywhere in the province. There's only one option to dilute the incumbent powers, but there's a problem. There's a coordination issue here. So you have, if you've got to tell the IFP that you want to redraw municipal boundaries, they're going to want concessions in their favor, sure. So you're going to have to like sacrifice some areas where you've got overlapping jurisdiction. The difficult thing is if you want to give up, if you want them to redraw Durban so that it favors minorities, then you got to be damn sure that the Zulu majority areas in the area are very hostile to the IFP. So this kind of thing that's a very sort of difficult game to play. I don't think that they'd be in favor of that kind of thing. So it's very difficult. I mean, the Zululand seems to me to be a lost cause for the most part. But if you help them with redrawing certain boundaries and helping them gerrymander a few areas, it wouldn't end too badly. But I mean, it would certainly line up your precedents for self-determination elsewhere. Very, very good. So I talk about Zuma and his shenanigans, but I mentioned that earlier. The one exception is the Ngonyama Trust. So once Zuma was very pro traditional governance, when he checked out, we had the return of the sort of more Republican revolutionaries under Ramaphosa, and so now they're aiming to like liquidate the Zulu Royal trust, the Ingonyama Trust. So they're like starting with like little legal pokes and prods, and there's been lots of deaths in the family. Like some of them are outright assassinations. Many of them are like illnesses / poisonings. It's very, very shady. You never really know what's going on there. So like they lost the king and almost all of his siblings in the same year. Really, really big deal. Yeah, so I mean, like the king at the moment, he's kind of politically isolated. He's not talking to a lot of people, and I mean, a lot of people are critical of the advisors who are advising him. It's a very fragile situation. So yeah, and I mentioned the NFP versus IFP thing, but yeah, as I said, the main problem is that, you've got minorities and Zulu nationalists don't share constituencies for the most part. And so it's difficult for them to have a compact with each other to gain control. But there's some interesting things over here. So when I said the IFP are bouncing back, okay, so where are we going? Party support. So when you take into account voter turnout, IFP, 23% of the election. You get very nice turnouts over here. 23% is not insignificant. But when you look at the gains that they've made in by-elections recently, it's huge. They've destroyed the EFF and they've outpaced the ANC. When they say Blackwards in KZN, then they mean pretty much anywhere in KZN, right? That is what's going on in KZN. Look at that gain. So I'm pretty sure I would be willing to bet money on it that the ANC are going to lose KZN next year. I'm pretty sure of it. And that's one little bonus is you're going to see an IFP DA coalition government in KZN, most likely. Although remains to be seen. Okay, enough of that nonsense. I'm going to be taking a few questions, and then I'm going to go. I've got to go and make supper because my wife's not feeling too lacquer. So, thankfully, there's not a lot of you who've asked questions. Okay. So Mtwawaba says, we don't know whose votes the PA and Action SA are going to cannibalize, ANCs or DAs. As I say, both. So PA, I think they're stealing more from the ANC than the DA, but it is kind of both. Action SA, they're taking some of the white liberals from the DA, but they're taking black conservatives from the ANC. That's the way I see it. Makes sense to me because Mashaba's got a reputation for being anti-illegal immigration and so on. So there's some of those. And I think he's going to gain a lot of first-time voters as well, especially as it gears up to the nationals. Because you have all of these sort of put South Africa first type people who are going to feel a bit closer to Mashaba. And I mean, they've been alienated for a while. And particularly after the 2021 riots, the way that affected Joburg, as I understand, is that you got, the whole Soweto Parliament movement, that got born out of armed resistance to the ANC, what's it called? The ANC Military Veterans Association, their MKVA. Because it was ANC people who did all those riots. And Soweto Parliament, and what is that guy's name? I can't remember his bloody name. The young bugger his dad was a gangster, and then he Nhlanhla Lux. That's the Bella. That whole crowd, they're not pro ANC at all. But their only political representation is really, if they're gonna vote, their only representation is Action SA. So. And then they say, Isle of James, I don't understand what the DA's plan is. The DA's plan, as I understand it, is they've got two plans that they're running sort of simultaneously. One they pretend they don't have, and one they pretend they have. So the one they pretend they're having is the Moonshot Pact, which is going to lose. Personally, if I was them, I'd say the smart move is really focus on Gauteng, focus on KZN, focus on the Western Cape, consolidate your provincial gains, focus on devolving power, focus on your minority communities, consolidate your base, keep them really loyal, be their like rock. That's what you need to be. That's all you've got, right? But instead, what they're trying to do is they're trying to get into Pretoria because they think they can fix the country before the budget crisis that's staring us in the face. I did a stream on that a while ago. I got a lot of financial details on that. Look at the one that if you go into my things and you go live and then you go look for the one that says fiscal cliff on it. And it's very short, so it'll give you a nice rundown. But basically, we haven't got much time. DA knows we haven't got much time, so they really want to get into power, which is why you've got four of the biggest leaders in their party. As I said, Zille, Steenhuisen, Msimanga, and Hill Lewis have all made public comments that they support the idea of a coalition with the ANC at some point. And so I mean, like, I can't give receipts like that right now. I'll probably do it at a later stage. But I've revisited that topic a few times. My main point is I think that they're offering the Moonshot Pact because they know that selling an ANC coalition is going to alienate a lot of their voters. So they have to do this, but they also think it's win-win because this isn't going to win, and then they get to say, well, we tried everything. Now we're going to have to be forced to go into coalition with the ANC to keep the EFF out. Right? It is a win-win for them. It makes sense. So that's for you, Isle of James. And then Unati Clarissa says, a party that introduces barriers to voting would be instantly famous and popular. I'm not so sure it would be, but it would certainly be popular with some people. I think you'd have riots for a lot of the population, and it'd be completely destabilized if you did that. This is not a country that can do disenfranchisement, and all of the sort of literate members of all the journalists and academics and politicians have come out of the woodwork saying it's apartheid 2.0. You're trying to dilute the black vote. It's not. I'm sorry for taking. It wouldn't work. So Euro African says, what would your advice be for South Africans who support Cape independence but who do not live in the Western Cape? That's a good point. Vote Vryheidsfront, I guess, because they support Cape independence. I'd say vote Vryheidsfront. But if you want, I'd say also donate to the CIAG if you've got a few pennies, because I mean the Cape Independence Advocacy Group, Phil Craig's group, they really, really do a lot of good bloody work. So if you're looking for someone who's going to actually achieve anything, that's them. Those are the guys. I promise you, you're going to get your money's worth in a few months. Ntwawaba says grant recipients should not be able to vote. I stand with. Look, I mean, sure, I agree with that on some level, but it's just not feasible. It's not going to happen. No one's willing to pass up those votes. So you're going to have to get them. 50% of the country, is fully dependent on grants. Then you've got any percentage above that supports grants, but isn't receiving them, and you'll never get that party into power. So you'd have to lie to the public to get into power to do that kind of reform. The only way you could do that is by seizing power non-electorally, and I don't think anyone's going to do that. Isle of James again, it doesn't really matter that much if it is a struggle to get an independent Cape working, because the alternative is collapsing anywhere with the rest of South Africa. I agree. It's my position pretty much, yeah. Timo Bo, my boy. By mistake, surely she didn't actually say that. I shit you not. You can look this up. 2013 Employment Equity Act. DA votes for them, and then she literally says it was by mistake. I'm not kidding you. It's the most mental thing I've ever read. If I'd known about that when I met her, it would have been a very awkward conversation because I don't know how she'd have been able to explain that one. Anyway, reminds me of my old painter who claimed that his wife died from 3 stab wounds by accident. I know what you mean. Yeah. Timobor says, is the only hope for minorities small organized rebellions here and there? Well, yeah, you have to be very organized, and you have to be very specific on what your scope is, or you're not going to win it. Don't expend your energy on nonsense, because black people aren't going to vote for your parties. That's just how it is. Tycoon Tengoku says, raising higher taxes won't meet the budget shortfall. No, I mean, so you want to understand that, actually, I should probably do a stream on this later, but at a later date. But I have run the numbers on this, and we have passed the peak of the Laffer curve years ago. We've already got several groups who are contemplating a tax revolt. So if the ANC pushes this too hard, they can see serious capital flight, and they might actually get a lower return on their tax revenues if they raise rates by too much. It's really at that level now. I mean, if you've seen the ratios, like how few of the population are contributing the majority of tax receipts. I mean, come on, you can't raise it. They can't squeeze any more out, really. It's not looking good for them, because I mean, only a certain sliver of the population really pays tax to begin with. Komisosauntsidi. Would this independent Cape be just the Western Cape province, or is there a chance / desire for expansion? Well, yeah. The thing is, you have to go with borders that already exist. So Western Cape is kind of what can work right now, but certainly most of us in this movement think, well, Northern Cape, great, add them on. So if it comes to referendum time, people just like say, well, hey, Western Cape, you want in on this referendum, and you just extend it. And then in the long term, there'll be a competition over the western part of the Eastern Cape, where it's majority Afrikaans. So the area that I think you could call it the Tsitsikamma region if you wanted to give it a name. So first the Western Cape, then the Northern Cape, then Tsitsikamma. That's generally how people are thinking about this. But nobody in the movement wants to include the whole of the Eastern Cape, because the people who live there do not share the same values. They don't vote for the same parties. They're hostile. They generally have political ideas that are incommensurate and with that of the Western Cape. So a lot of sort of communism, black nationalism, stuff like that, and that'll basically place us into the same position that we've been in for the rest of the country, and it's that's what we really want. The Cape does encompass a sizable native black community, but they're not a majority, and not all of them think in exactly the same way as the rest of the country. So it's not the same as taking in, former Transkei and Ciskei. That would have a really, really powerful impact if you included them. Yeah, definitely. So, yeah, it wouldn't. As Isla James says, the area up to Port Elizabeth. Yeah, if you want to get really interesting, and this is a final little note here before I log off, is that I got into an argument with someone on Twitter a while ago, and they were saying like, that black people have inhabited the whole of the Cape since the year dot. I thought, well, hang on a second, what's your sources? So he quoted a page of Jan van Riebeck's diary, and he was quoting what's her name? She's rather famous. She's called Eva Kratoa, right? So I'm one of her descendants because she married into the white community, right? So almost any white person who's got early stage settlers family has her genes in them somewhere. So the anyway, so she tells a story about how just over there somewhere are these people called the Carbona. It's sort of how they shortened the greeting in the dialect of isiXhosa that was used in that days. They greet each other Sakulbona. You can understand it's the dialect is much more archaic back then. So anyway, doesn't matter. So, but she mixes a whole bunch of things up. So if you read the actual text, she mentions the name of a great famous king of the Carbona who what's his name? Flip it, I can't remember, but in reality, the guy was actually a king of what's now Zimbabwe. So there's all of these secondhand tales that she didn't really understand. In reality, about 30, 40 years later, there was a troop of a small team of explorers, Dutch explorers, that left to try and contact this tribe that they called the Carbona. And this is the Xhosa again, as I say. And they had to travel 500 miles along the coast. And then when they interviewed the people in the region, they said, "Oh, it's just another 5 days ride towards the east." And so I took this account, which is the first account of any contact with them. I traced it along using Google Maps. I sort of traced out 500 miles along the coast. And then I went and looked up, how far can a horse travel in 5 days? And then I took the lowest possible estimate. I took the lowest estimate. I think did I take the lowest or the highest? I can't flip and remember. But anyway, I took an estimate that was within the reasonable window based on the fact that they're carrying men's belongings and kak. So I sort of thought, they can't travel that far. So I went with that, and and it basically just put me just other side of the Sundays River. So when the Cape was first settled, the Xhosa were on that side of the Sundays River. And if you go and look up the a map of the 2011 census data, you look up all the language groups in South Africa, then you get you get that turquoise color for the Afrikaans speakers and the red color for the Xhosa speakers and so on. And you'll notice there's this flippin' line that goes right down the middle of the province that traces the Sundays River to this day. So it's really, really interesting. But that's just yeah. Final question that I'm going to go on. This is from Mr. Tsidi, who said, I understand that most of the Eastern Cape is Xhosa, but given that the western third of the Eastern Cape is demographically different, I figured that the Cape Republic might eventually take them. We might not. I mean, that's not how things work out. And whether or not if they desperately want it enough, then it'll happen eventually. But if they don't, then it won't. And because those kind of border problems are very difficult. If it's not something that already exists as an administrative territory, it's very difficult to peel off. So, yeah, that kind of dispute is going to be very difficult. Even if we do get independence, and I would not put money on that coming right as much as I would love it to happen. So yeah, that's that. But in short, basically, here's the conclusion. If you want something to happen electorally, you vote for the party who will move the DA into the direction that you want them to go. If you're a black nationalist, sure, vote EFF. Who cares? I mean, it makes the ANC, they forces the ANC to be more radical. If you want to, I mean, look, for the Zulu nationalists, you've only got one option. You've got the IFP. Just vote IFP. Super easy. If you want the DA to do something, vote for the party that is going to do that thing, or who wants to do that thing, and they'll drag the DA with them. And for anything sensible so far, the only party that I can really think there is the Vryheidsfront. They're really, really eager to work with colored communities. They're super eager. You have no idea, right? So If you're colored or if you're white, English, Afrikaans, your real best bet is still for AIDS Front Plus. Not because the DA are bad administrators. They've got the finest administrative staff in the country. They really do. But their strategies are cuck, and they need to have a bit of sense slapped in them. That's the truth. And that's the conclusion. And that's the end of the broadcast. Good night. Drive safe. Bye-bye.